Christian and I had lived a simple, stable life our entire lives. We were never particularly wealthy, but we were never in debt either. He worked in the city's maintenance department, and I spent over 20 years as an administrative assistant at the local elementary school. 2 normal salaries, nothing extravagant, but enough to keep a roof over our heads and food on the table. Now that we're both retired, life is quieter. We live in an old house on the outskirts of town. Between our 2 pensions, we bring in a little over $3,800 a month. We paid off the mortgage a long time ago. Our days are peaceful. Grocery shopping, home-cooked meals, gardening, visits with old friends on weekends. Nothing exciting, but serene nonetheless.
So mit ihm ist Christian plants roses in the garden.
I stand in the kitchen, making coffee, and look out the window. When I see the delicate blossoms swaying in the light, it feels like a reflection of our current life.
Kviet, jet tender.
The only thing that still keeps us awake at night is our son, Austin. He's 33, has a steady job, and is a good boy. Reliable, down to earth. It's just that nothing seems to work out for him when it comes to love. Christian and I never pushed him, at least not out loud, but the hope is there. We'd love to see him come home with someone solid. Someone he can build a life with. Someone to ease our minds as we grow older. That evening, he came home early from work. His expression, half shy, half excited, gave him away before he even spoke, as if he had good news he could barely contain. "Mom, Dad," he said, taking off his shoes, with a smile that made him look like a 5-year-old. "I have a girlfriend. She's coming over tonight. I want you to meet her." Her name was Victoria. Christian and I exchanged a look, and without a word, both of us smiled. We knew it was a first. Austin had never brought anyone home before. I rushed into the kitchen and prepared a few extra plates for dinner. Christian rummaged through the cupboards and found our special coffee mugs, the ones we only use at Christmas. He polished them until they gleamed like mirrors. When the doorbell rang, my hands were still wet, but my heart had already raced ahead. I opened the door, and next to him stood a girl who seemed perfect, tall, slender, with brown hair tied back and a light blue coat that made her seem like a fresh spring morning. Her eyes crinkled at the corners when she smiled, and her dimples softened her face. She carried a couple of carefully wrapped gift bags, and when she said, "Mr. and Mrs. Smith, it's a pleasure to meet you," her voice was as clear and bright as the song of a robin outside our kitchen window in April. At dinner, she was exceedingly attentive. She helped me wash the dishes without me having to ask. She refilled Christian's cup when it was empty. She spoke just enough and always with a smile. She was warm, polite, and easy to like. At one point, I nudged Christian under the table, my subtle way of saying, "Look at this." Our boy had finally found a good one, and honestly, I believed it then. Victoria seemed sweet, considerate, the kind of girl you'd be lucky to find. It was only later we realized that sweetness and consideration can also come at a price. After a couple of glasses of wine, the conversation relaxed. She began asking us where we had worked and how retirement was treating us. I told her that Christian and I together received a little over $3,800 in pensions a month. The house was paid off, and life was quite comfortable. That's when I noticed it, a sparkle in her eyes. She hid it well, but I saw it. She smiled and said, "Wow, it seems like you two are doing better than most of my friends who are still working." Then, in the same casual tone, she asked, "So, does this house belong entirely to you?" I mentioned that Austin was our only child. "Have you thought about leaving it to him when he settles down?" At that moment, I thought she was just making small talk. I smiled and said, "Yes, the house is ours. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms. Perfect for the 2 of us." I added that we had thought about helping Austin with a house when the time was right, but we hadn't made any definite plans. Looking back, it wasn't small talk, it was an exploration. Every one of her words was a careful probe, gentle as a breeze, but precisely aimed. After dinner, she left with Austin. I stood by the table and opened the gifts she had brought. The wrapping was beautiful, no question, but inside were just knickknacks, pretty but ultimately useless. And right then, something shifted inside me. A small, silent ripple beneath the surface, like a pebble dropped into still water. Small, but unsettling. From that evening on, Victoria became a regular visitor to our house, especially on weekends. She never came empty-handed. Sometimes it was a box of cookies, sometimes a bag of imported fruits, once even a bottle of good wine. She always seemed to choose exactly what I had casually mentioned. "Mrs. Smith, these are the cookies you liked last time. I had to go to 3 stores to find them." "Mr. Smith, I heard this wine has a delicious finish."
Schallviter yt.
She smiled sweetly and spoke politely. Initially, I was genuinely touched. She seemed thoughtful, considerate, as if she truly wanted to become part of our family. She was especially affectionate towards me. When we went shopping, she'd link arms with me. At the local coffee shop, she'd massage my shoulders and say, "Your shoulders seem a bit tense lately, Mrs. Smith. You need to take care of yourself. You're not getting any younger." Her tone was more tender than my own daughter's. But with time, something felt off. Her affection always seemed linked to money. Gifts, favors, little remarks that were a bit too sharp. Like that time we passed a store with a wool coat in the window that cost easily over $650. She sighed and said, "That color would look so good on you, Mrs. Smith. When Austin and I get married, I'll buy you that coat." Or when a neighbor arrived with a new car, she'd look at it and comment, "Austin's colleague is so lucky. His mom bought him a brand new pickup truck for his birthday. How sweet." She loved telling stories about other people's weddings. "My cousin just got married. The groom's family bought them a row house downtown, paid for in cash, they even got a brand new Mercedes. My college roommate married a rich guy. His mother-in-law gave her custom-made jewelry as a welcome gift, and the wedding was held at a beachfront estate." She told all this in a cheerful voice with a radiant smile, but her eyes, those eyes showed an unmistakable longing, not envy, not admiration, but expectation. She wasn't just recounting, she was planting seeds, dropping hints, devising a plan, as if to say, "Dear Mr. and Mrs. Smith, please observe these examples before giving your final answer." Christian and I began to speak about it quietly. One evening, he lit a cigarette and leaned against the kitchen door, his brow furrowed. "That girl talks too smoothly, as if she knows what you're going to say before you say it." I handed him a cup of tea and lowered my voice. "She's sweet, yes, but I can't shake the feeling that she doesn't want to get closer, she wants to infiltrate." This unease I felt began to grow, like the ivy in the back corner of our garden. Tentative at first, then creeping, winding, clinging tighter with each visit. And it wasn't long before something happened that proved we weren't imagining things. It was a Saturday afternoon, one of those days when sunlight streamed across the living room floor like warm honey. Victoria and Austin were cuddling on the sofa, and we were all chatting about the possibility of taking a weekend trip to a scenic area. The mood was light, relaxed, just another cozy family moment. Then she paused mid-sentence, gently stirring her coffee. The clinking of metal on porcelain was bright and sharp. She looked at us with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mr. and Mrs. Smith," she began, "Austin and I have been together for a while now. Have you thought about when we might get married?" Christian and I exchanged a glance. Of course, this was good news. We both nodded to show our support. But what she said next sent a shiver down my spine. "We've talked about it," she said nonchalantly. "And after the wedding, we definitely can't live with you. Young couples need their own space." That made absolute sense. We had never expected them to move in with us. I was about to say that we'd be happy to help them find an apartment when she steered the conversation in a very specific direction. "I've been eyeing the Beacon Lofts downtown," she said with another smile. "They're quite new, have 24/7 security, and the schools nearby are top-notch. It would be perfect if we have kids." As soon as she said Beacon Lofts, something tightened in my chest. That area was one of the most expensive in the city. Prime real estate with a corresponding price tag. Forget buying directly. Even the down payment would be a huge stretch for us. Austin looked just as surprised. He hesitated a moment and mumbled, "Victoria, that place might be a little out of our budget." Her smile faded as if a light switch had been flipped. She abruptly pulled away from his arm and turned to him, her voice cutting. out of our budget, Austin? Are you expecting me to live with your parents after we get married? Is that the plan? Have you ever thought about giving me a real home? Or am I just someone who fits into your life when it's convenient for you? Her eyes welled up with tears. Her voice dripped with wounded pride. She looked like someone who had just been betrayed. Austin opened his mouth, desperate, trying to explain, but the words wouldn't come. I stepped in to defuse the situation. Victoria, dear, it's not that we wouldn't help you. The Beacon lofts are beautiful, yes, but the prices are another matter. If you look a little further out, like in Willow Creek, the houses are newer, the neighborhoods are safe, and the schools are still excellent. I'm not interested, she interrupted, her voice quiet but firm. I'm not considering any other place. All my colleagues got apartments downtown, thanks to their husbands' families when they got married. She didn't raise her voice, didn't bang her cup on the table, or get angry. But the way she said, I'm not interested, sharp, definitive, almost dry, was harder than any shout. It felt as if the sunlight was dimming. I looked at Austin, who sat silently, staring at the floor like a scolded child. Then I looked at Victoria. Her expression was calm, resolute, as if everything she had said was not only reasonable but long overdue. And for the first time, a doubt crept into my heart that I had never allowed before. This wasn't a couple working through premarital issues. It was a dress rehearsal for a financial negotiation. I used to think talking about money killed romance. Now I believe if you don't talk about money, she might have already memorized your bank account's security questions. After that conversation about the apartment, Victoria's visits didn't stop, but the atmosphere had changed. She continued to smile, continued to bring small gifts, but the warmth felt rehearsed, practiced. And little by little, almost imperceptibly, she began to steer our conversations in a new direction, towards her parents. She started telling stories about her childhood with vivid, emotional details. My parents really had it rough, she'd say with glistening eyes. Especially my dad. He started at an auto repair shop at 18. His hands are full of calluses. He never got his teeth fixed, just to pay for my schooling. And my mom was sick almost her whole life, dependent on medication, in and out of the hospital. My dad had to be both father and mother and never complained. She told these stories with a catch in her voice, wiping the corners of her eyes with a tissue, and truly Christian and I were moved. We knew hardship too, and to hear how much she respected her parents touched us deeply. But with time, I noticed a pattern. Her devotion to her parents, though admirable, wasn't just gratitude. It started to feel like she was preparing us. She wasn't directly asking for help, but she was planting the idea that supporting her family would also be part of our future. Every story of struggle ended the same way: Austin and I will make sure they're comfortable. They've suffered enough. It was subtle, but the implication was there. She wasn't just sharing, she was lobbying for her cause. The moment that truly shook me was Christian's birthday. Austin brought her to dinner. We had prepared a full meal. Roast, sides, even a homemade cake. The mood was warm and relaxed. In the middle of dinner, Victoria raised her glass and smiled sweetly. Mr. and Mrs. Smith, she said, happy birthday.
I wish you health and happiness.
You both have worked hard, and your retirement incomes are very generous. I hope that one day you can help Austin and me start our little home, and perhaps even give my parents a little assistance. They've done so much for me, I just can't let them down. She said it as if it were a joke. Her voice was soft, her expression sweet, but her eyes watched us closely. Christian chuckled lightly, raised his wineglass, but I saw it pause in the air for a second. Austin stared at his plate silently. He knew what she was saying wasn't right, but he dared not speak up. Inside, I felt a jolt, as if someone had knocked my heart out of rhythm. It's wonderful when a child wants to support their parents, but to expect future in-laws to foot the bill and package it as if it's no big deal, that's not devotion, that's emotional manipulation.
I bit my tongue.
It was Christian's birthday, and I didn't want to ruin the evening, but my heart sank. When she insisted on a downtown apartment, I thought she had expensive taste. But now I was beginning to see something else. It wasn't about taste, it was about strategy. And indeed, a few days later, they came again. After dinner, Victoria leaned back on the sofa, sipping her tea, and pulled out her phone. She let out a dramatic sigh. Ugh, this commute is killing me. The office is so far, and with the subway and bus, it's too much, and I need to be presentable for morning meetings. Makeup, hair, it's exhausting. Wanting to make conversation, I nodded. Yes, commuting can be tough. She immediately jumped on it. Exactly. That's why I told Austin we'll need a second car after the wedding. Something roomy, maybe a crossover. It would make work easier. Weekend trips would be more fun, and when we have kids, it would be perfect for school pickups. It all sounded quite reasonable, practical even. I asked, do you have one in mind? Do you have a budget? Austin opened his mouth, but Victoria cut him off before he could speak. Actually, I found one I love. A luxury SUV. It's not that expensive, about $60,000 after taxes and fees. It's super safe for a woman behind the wheel, and the space would really make our lives easier. Christian and I looked at each other, and I knew he was thinking the same thing I was. Was this really about functionality or showing off? I was about to probe further when she delivered the real kicker. With a sweet smile, she looked at us. Perhaps we'll need a little help with the car. You know, my parents haven't saved much, and I'm just starting out in my career. But if you both could help finance it as a wedding gift, that would show how much you support us. You do support us, don't you? I laughed internally, bitterly and silently. She wasn't suggesting a gift. It was a price tag with our names penciled on the margin. She wanted the most expensive neighborhood. She wanted a $60,000 car, and now she wanted us to help her parents too. Victoria's words were sweet. Her voice was kind. She called us Mr. and Mrs. Smith with exquisite charm. But when she looked at us, I only saw someone appraising our assets. She wasn't trying to join a family. She was trying to buy our financial freedom with our own checkbook. I looked at Austin. He stared at the floor, his face caught in a mixture of confusion and quiet frustration, as if he were trapped between two impossible definitions. What it meant to love someone, and what it meant to be responsible for that person. That was the moment I knew. I couldn't stay silent any longer. The wedding hadn't even happened, and she was already trying to tie our retirement funds to her lifestyle. She wanted us to finance her future, take on her parents' old age security, and package it all with bows as if it were a generous family plan. This wasn't about building a marriage, it was about securing a long-term financial sponsor with benefits. That night, I sat alone in our bedroom, curled up in the armchair by the window. I didn't even turn on the light. I just stared into the darkness, feeling its weight around me. I knew what I had to do. It was time to talk to my son. That weekend, I asked him to come into the study. I closed the door behind us. No distractions, no polite skirting around the issue, just the kind of honest conversation that leaves no room for evasion. The light in the study was soft and warm. I poured him a cup of his favorite coffee, the hazelnut roast he drank in college. He smiled slightly as I handed it to him. I kept my voice steady. Austin, I've noticed you seem exhausted lately. Planning a wedding is no small feat. That's a lot of pressure, isn't it? He sighed, leaned back in the chair, and rubbed his temples with his fingers. Yeah, Victoria has a lot of expectations. I didn't beat around the bush. Those aren't just expectations, they're unreasonable. She wants a downtown apartment, a $60,000 SUV, and expects us to pay for everything. I looked him in the eyes, my tone calm but firm. Austin, it's not that we wouldn't be willing to help. If you had found someone who genuinely wanted to build a life with you, someone who loved you for who you are, we'd be happy to give you wedding gifts and help wherever we could. But what she's asking for is not only more than we can afford. It's more than we should give. I paused, then said each word carefully and clearly. I don't think she loves you. I think she loves the life that you, your father, and I can offer her. Especially our retirement savings. His expression changed instantly. He snapped his head up, his gaze suddenly alert and hurt. Mom, how can you say something like that about her? He said, his voice strained.
Victoria isn't like that. She just wants security.
Her family didn't have much. Wanting a better future shouldn't make her a bad person. I took a deep breath, but something sharp remained stuck inside me. She has every right to want a good life, Austin, but the way she's going about it is wrong. Has she ever considered your stress, the life your father and I worked so hard to build? She uses other people's weddings as a benchmark. She demands houses, cars, support for her parents. She's not planning a future with you, she's presenting a bill. He opened his mouth to defend her again. She's direct, yes, but she's been good to me and to you. I interrupted him. She's nice to us because she wants us to say yes. I pointed to the stack of bills and the calculator on the coffee table. Think about it, hasn't she always tried to find out how much we've saved? Doesn't every conversation end with a hint about how hard her parents worked and how much she wants to give back to them?
Austin, I know you love her.
I understand that, but love doesn't mean losing your mind. He lowered his gaze again, silent. I could see it in his shoulders, how they slumped under the weight of what he didn't want to admit. He was torn, caught between what he wanted to believe was true and what he was starting to fear might be real. My voice softened. I reached out and placed my hand on his. I'm not asking you to make a decision tonight. I'm just asking you to open your eyes, to really see her. Ask yourself, does she love you as a person, or is she in love with everything you bring to the table? And as for your father and me, is she grateful for us? Or is she just calculating how much we're worth? His fingers tightened slightly around the coffee cup. He didn't speak, but I knew deep down, something had shifted. This conversation didn't change everything overnight. Austin drank his coffee in silence. He didn't defend her again, but I could see where his heart still leaned. A flicker of hesitation was in his eyes when he looked at me, as if he were caught between his feelings and what he was starting to suspect. And maybe, just maybe, he was afraid to look too closely. I knew I couldn't push him. You can't convince someone to stop loving, not when they still do. He had to see it with his own eyes, experience it, feel the ground shifting beneath his feet. Only then would he truly wake up. That night, Christian and I talked about it again. He sat silently in the soft light of the living room lamp, listening to every word. When I finished, he didn't say anything at first, just stared at the wall clock, its second hand ticking tirelessly in the silence. Then he put out his cigarette with an abrupt movement and said quietly, "We can't let her pressure us like this. I'll find a moment to speak with Austin alone." I don't know exactly what father and son discussed. They had their conversation behind closed doors, and neither gave any details. But I felt the change. Austin became quieter, more withdrawn. At dinner, he'd pick at his food, his gaze lost, his jaw tense, as if he wanted to say something but dared not. I knew the seeds were planted. The words I had spoken that day, and what Christian added afterwards, had taken root in him. They hadn't blossomed yet, but they were there waiting, growing. Victoria must have felt it too. She didn't back down. In fact, she doubled down, and soon she played her biggest card yet. She brought her parents into the picture. She told Austin it was time. Time for both sets of parents to meet to officially discuss wedding plans. As soon as Austin mentioned it, something tightened in my chest. It wasn't just a dinner to talk about flowers and venues. I felt it. It would be a negotiation, not a celebration, a meeting to draw lines, define expectations, and perhaps, just perhaps, settle scores. Because when someone like Victoria says, "Let's talk about the wedding," what she really means is, "Let's talk about what your family is willing to pay." And I had a feeling that whatever she had planned for this family meeting, her wish list would be crystal clear. The meeting was arranged at a family-friendly restaurant on the outskirts of town, quiet, casual, one of those places with checkered tablecloths and framed photos of old farmhouses on the walls. We had reserved a table in the back, hoping for a quiet atmosphere where we could talk about everything like adults. It was a beautiful afternoon, one of those days when the sunlight falls perfectly through the windows, but I couldn't shake the weight in my chest. A silent tightness lay on my heart. Christian and I arrived early. We sat silently, drinking ice water, exchanging glances occasionally, knowing full well that this would not be a friendly get-together. It was a negotiation, plain and simple. And we wouldn't just be meeting her parents, we would be appraised. Austin arrived hand in hand with Victoria, followed by her parents. Her mother wore a dark purple dress, too showy and a size too small, her hair teased into a voluminous cloud. She smiled warmly, but her gaze was piercing, appraising, calculating. Her father followed a step behind her, silent, stooped, in a faded leather jacket, fiddling with an unlit cigarette between his fingers. He nodded once in greeting, without really looking us in the eye.
Wie sat down.
The waiter came by, brought menus and water. We had barely exchanged a few polite words when Victoria's mother immediately interjected, her voice cheerful, lively, but with a tone that was anything but casual. "Oh, Victoria was always such a good girl," she said excitedly. "Smart, hard-working, never gave us any trouble. She's doing wonderfully in her job. Her boss loves her. Honestly, she never lacked admirers over the years, but she only had eyes for Austin. It's fate, isn't it?" Christian and I smiled politely and nodded, but the tone was clear. It wasn't a compliment, it was the introduction to a bill. And indeed, her voice changed, grew softer with a sudden nostalgia. "We come from humble beginnings. I work the checkout at a grocery store, 12 hours a day on my feet. Her father worked in a warehouse, hauling heavy loads until his back gave out. We saved so Victoria could go to college. She never lacked for anything." She wiped the corners of her eyes with a paper tissue, but I saw no tears. "All we want," she continued, "is for her life to be easier now. She's worked so hard. She deserves a break, an easier future." She said easier twice. It sounded like a blessing, but it felt like a bank statement. Then her husband chimed in, clearing his throat a few times before speaking at the right moment. "We don't ask for much," he said. "We don't need anything special, just that you're stable. You know, I've had a lot of health problems in recent years, and well, we're not getting any younger. Retirement planning is becoming more and more important." He said it casually, almost lightly, but every word hit like a slow-burning fuse. When he said retirement planning, he wasn't speaking to his wife. He looked directly at Austin. It couldn't have been more obvious if he had written it on a blackboard. "You will be responsible for us too." Christian and I sat opposite them, still smiling, still playing along. But inside, I was seething. This wasn't a family dinner. It was a presentation, a transaction, and we were the supposed investors. Meanwhile, Victoria played her role perfectly, refilling her mother's water, piling extra portions onto her father's plate with a gentle hand on his shoulder. She was the living image of filial grace, but I saw it. The small smile that formed at the corner of her mouth, that she tried to hide but couldn't. It wasn't warmth, it was certainty, as if she believed the deal was already done. The meal was a blur. The food was good, plentiful, but I barely touched my plate. Everything tasted like dust. As soon as we left the parking lot, Victoria exploded. "What was that?" she fumed, turning in her seat to glare at Austin. "Your parents didn't say anything concrete the whole time." My mother poured her heart out, and they just sat there, smiling like statues. "What does that mean? Do they think they're better than us?" Austin nervously tried to calm her. "Victoria, come on. It's not like that. My parents are they just don't want to spend money, do they?" she interrupted. Her voice loud, sharp as a knife. "They don't want to buy a downtown apartment. They're dragging their feet on the car, and now they won't even acknowledge my parents' retirement. Austin, do you really want to marry me or not?" The air in the car grew heavy, and at that moment, it wasn't about a condo or a car or who was paying for what. It was about control. Poor Austin looked like a man in the middle of a storm, trying to convince himself it was just a passing breeze. After that dinner, Victoria's emotional campaign accelerated day by day, more intense, more relentless. She began to feed Austin a steady stream of guilt-laden pronouncements, packaging her demands in the language of duty and devotion. "Taking care of my parents is our responsibility," she told him. "They worked their whole lives, sacrificed everything for me. Now you'll be like a son to them. You can't turn your back on family." But she didn't stop there. She started naming numbers. "I've been thinking," she said one evening with a soft, calculated smile. $3,800 a month for my parents is fair. Food, medications, bills, it adds up. And with prices rising every year, we can always adjust that later. Austin didn't say much the first time she mentioned it, but something changed in him afterward. His mood darkened, the light that once shone in his eyes, the faint smile, the spark in his voice, all extinguished. Now he walked through life with a furrowed brow. At dinner, he barely spoke, pushing his food around as if he couldn't even taste it. And when he looked at Christian and me, he always did so hesitantly, as if holding something back. We saw it. We saw our son, the same boy who once brightened every room, sinking deeper and deeper into a sea of emotions, slowly suffocating under someone else's definition of love and duty. It broke my heart. This wasn't a woman with expectations. This was manipulation. Little by little, she was changing him, redefining love as sacrifice, convincing him that care meant payment, and payment proved his worth. And I knew it. We couldn't watch any longer. Some lessons cannot be taught with words. Some truths must be seen to be believed. It was time to uncover the truth, to lay it bare so Austin could see for himself whether Victoria was truly building a future with him or just securing one thanks to him. I didn't want to destroy her, but I wasn't willing to let my son become another person's open purse, smiling a lifetime of quiet regret. So I made a decision. I would gather evidence, not for myself or Christian, but for Austin, so that when the truth finally knocked on his door, he would have no choice but to open it. Sometimes the truth doesn't come all at once. It sneaks in on a random afternoon, hidden in the quiet moments you least expect. It was a calm Saturday, one of those days with birdsong and sunlight softly filtered through the curtains. Austin had just gone to the bank to get some documents. Victoria stayed on the sofa, curled up in front of the TV. I was on the balcony, tending to my roses, when I heard her voice. Quiet, cautious, as if she didn't want to be overheard. But the balcony door was open, and the living room wasn't far. She was talking on the phone with her mother. I froze, watering can still in hand, and instinctively reached for my phone. Silently, I pressed the record button. Her tone was laced with satisfaction, mixed with just enough annoyance to sound real. "Mom, stop pushing me. Everything is going like clockwork," she said, loud enough for me to hear. I checked their finances. His parents make a few thousand a month from their pensions. The house is completely paid off. No debts. Austin, you know how he is. Gentle, easily swayed. I just need to pout a little, and he gives in.
Schelauket softly.
House and car are going well. I'm letting him handle that with his parents whenever he wants.
And you and dad, don't worry. VLL sorted out.
Housing, retirement plan, we're planning all that too.
Just let Emil handle it.
Then her tone changed. His mother is on the balcony.
I'll call you back later.
As soon as she hung up, the TV blared with a fast food commercial, filling the room with artificial noise, but her words still echoed in my ears, clear as broken glass. The sun continued to shine, but I felt nothing.
My hands wäre cold, my Brit kaukt beneath my ribs.
She wasn't here to build a life with my son. She was here to manage one, to manage us. Every detail choreographed, every word calculated. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, watching the water overflow from the watering can until the earth grew dark and heavy. Then I slowly went back inside. I smiled at her, asked if she wanted tea, as if nothing had happened. Why? It wasn't the right moment yet. I needed more, not just words he could dismiss as a misunderstanding. I needed something he couldn't look away from, something undeniable. And as if on cue, she gave it to me. In the following days, she escalated everything. She began taking Austin to more viewings in exclusive downtown condo complexes. Arranged test drives at luxury car dealerships. Each time they returned, she'd gush about the features of smart homes and comfortable leather seats, about family-friendly communities and advanced climate control, as if presenting us with the blueprint for a life she expected us to co-finance. Then came the final act. One evening, she arrived with a folder in her hand, with a professional demeanor. She sat in the middle of the sofa, legs crossed, face serene, and carefully placed the folder on the coffee table, as if about to present a strategy in a boardroom. "Mr. and Mrs. Smith, Austin," she began in a calm voice, her face radiating composure. "This isn't a demand, just a set of proposals, an initial plan to avoid misunderstandings or financial burdens in the future. My stomach churned. Christian's brow furrowed so deeply I thought it would never smooth out again. Page 1, housing plan. She suggested we help them with the down payment for an apartment in a new luxury complex downtown. We would take out the mortgage together, in both our names, she explained. But if you help from the beginning, it would significantly ease the burden. It's safer if the title includes both of us.
Page 2. Vehicle-Akquisition.
She recommended buying a new luxury SUV before the wedding, specifically in her name. That helps with financing, as I can get an employee discount through my company's insurance. It saves money overall, she smiled. I almost laughed, but didn't. Page 3, monthly family budget. Austin's salary would go into a joint account that she would manage. I keep very accurate records of expenses, so I think that will make our spending more efficient. Then came page 4, proposal for parental support. My parents have no retirement benefits, she wrote. Their work history was always sporadic. So we've decided to provide them with a monthly allowance of about $3,800 for living expenses. Austin and I will split the cost, but any support from you would be very valuable. And finally, a section titled Additional Considerations. Given future expenses like childcare, healthcare, and education, she suggested we consider setting up a family trust or potentially updating beneficiary assignments as a gesture of long-term support and shared security. Every sentence was polite, the tone warm, but the content cold, transactional. Every line was a dollar sign. I closed the folder, my hands sweaty. This wasn't a financial plan, it was a takeover strategy, a carefully veiled contract to convert affection into funding, in-laws into sponsors, and marriage into a merger. I looked up. Austin's face was pale. He stared at the pages as if they might burst into flames in his hands. His fingers dug into the edge of the folder, knuckles white, as if he didn't know whether to tear it up or throw it across the room. The room descended into a silence so deep that not even the TV could break it. A reality TV show played in the background. Voices laughed, cheered, celebrated superficial triumphs, while our house remained frozen, breathless. And I knew it, this was it. The curtain had finally lifted. The final act had begun, and it was time to see if my son would choose love or recognize its price. That night, the air in the living room felt frozen. Austin stared at Victoria's premarital financial and lifestyle proposal, his face caught between shock and disbelief. His fingers still clung to the edge of the paper, knuckles white, as if letting go would make it all real. But the words wouldn't come. Victoria, on the other hand, didn't seem nervous at all. She let out a gentle, light, almost loving laugh and said, "Austin, don't let the structure intimidate you. I know it might seem a bit intense for your parents, but these aren't demands. It's just responsible communication, so everyone knows what to expect." Then she turned to me, her voice soft, her posture elegant, her smile carefully measured. "Mrs. Smith, I have great respect for you and your husband. I did this not to provoke conflict, but to avoid it. It's not about money, it's about peace of mind." At first glance, it all sounded very reasonable. Her tone was calm, her makeup flawless, her expression sincere. To a stranger, she would have seemed like the embodiment of maturity and good intentions. Austin looked at her, then at me, his lips slightly parted. "Mom," he said softly, hesitantly. "I know this doesn't feel right, but Victoria is a good person really. She's just a bit too direct sometimes."
Tats all.
I didn't answer. I just looked at my son with a calmness that felt like stone. The fire within me that had previously burned slowly was now ashes, cold, heavy, and still. Christian sat nearby, his brow furrowed, silent.
Austin insisted.
"We just want a stable life. That's all. I know you and Dad are worried, but I need you to trust me. I want to be with her. I just need your support." Support. The word felt like a needle in my chest. Support. As if we hadn't done exactly that, every day of his life, from his first cries in the night to the fevers that kept us awake until dawn, from reviewing his college applications after every rejection to waiting outside his office in the cold after his first heartbreak, just to bring him a cup of coffee and show him he wasn't alone. We gave him our days, our nights, our bones, our breath, and now it all boiled down to, you don't support me. I picked up the folder, closed it carefully, and slid it back across the table to him. My voice was calm, too calm. Austin, if this is your decision, then go ahead, try it. If you want to marry her, we won't stop you. But from now on, you'll have to learn to take responsibility for your choices. He froze, eyes wide. He hadn't expected that. Perhaps he had expected another discussion. Perhaps tears, but not this. He opened his mouth as if to reply, but the words didn't come. I stood up, gathered the teacups from the table, and walked into the kitchen. You don't have to stay for dinner, I said, without turning around. We weren't expecting guests, and we're not in the mood for visitors. Victoria's expression wavered for just a second. Still, she stood up and linked arms with Austin. Come on, she said. The door closed softly behind them with a dull click, and then it was just Christian and I, left in the silence they left behind. I slowly sank onto the sofa, clutching the handle of my teacup so tightly that the veins in my hand stood out. Christian took the cup from my hands and set it aside. Then he gently placed a hand on my shoulder. Don't let it eat at you, he said. Sometimes, letting them hit the wall is the only way they learn. I nodded, but didn't speak. Not that night, nor the next morning. After that night, I didn't call Austin, didn't text him. I didn't ask where he was or what he was thinking. I didn't mention his name at the table. It was like closing a window in the middle of a storm.
Let the wind rage outside.
Let him stand there and feel what it's like, to finally see who had been holding the umbrella all along. After that night, the house became quieter than ever. Christian spent his mornings trimming branches in the backyard. I kept busy with cooking, cleaning, folding laundry. But we didn't mention Austin, didn't mention Victoria. It was as if the warmth had vanished from the rooms, replaced by a fine, invisible layer of dust. Without speaking it aloud, we came to a silent agreement. No interference, no giving in. Austin sent short messages now and then. How are you? Or hope your back is better. I replied with slow, monosyllabic answers. Good. Okay. No further questions. I didn't ask how he was. I didn't ask if he had changed his mind. No fights, no drama, just a quiet, steady retreat. He came by a few times, picked up some things he'd left behind, as if clinging to something without naming it. I made him a plate of soup, but didn't say much. He only stayed briefly. He never once mentioned Victoria, but I could see the storm behind his eyes. He was breaking down, caught between the loyalty he wanted to give and the truth he didn't want to confront, and I wasn't standing idly by. The call I had overheard from the balcony, I had quietly recorded it, clear and distinct. I didn't confront her with it, didn't send it to Austin, I just waited. But then something else came to me. One evening, as I was scrolling through social media, a nearby post popped up in my feed, something about a luxury condo complex downtown. I clicked on it out of curiosity. The photo showed Victoria standing in an elegant model apartment, in a tailored suit, holding a coffee cup with a satisfied smile. Her caption read, "Who says you need a silver spoon to live well? I never play to lose." I went to her page. It wasn't her public profile, but a private one. Clearly for close friends, not for family, not for Austin. The comments turned my stomach. Another sugar daddy. What? Damn, who paid for that view? You have to teach us how to make a man hand over his wallet like that. And Victoria's reply, easy work, dress well, and wrap it up tight. My hands trembled. Later, I contacted an old friend from the community health clinic where I used to work. Her daughter was interning at Victoria's office. What she told me clarified everything. Victoria talks as if your son is a stepping stone, she said. She tells people she wants to finalize the wedding quickly to get to the money. She even asked about family trusts, said she wanted to start planning her in-laws' asset strategy. She had never mentioned any of this to Austin, but when it came to our house, our pensions, our lifelong savings, she had no shame whatsoever. I collected everything, screenshots, recordings, statements, and saved it to a USB drive. I didn't rush to show it to him. I waited for him to be ready, waited for the words, "I see it." But those words never came until one night I realized I couldn't wait any longer. I invited him to dinner. He showed up with a frozen pizza in a crumpled bag. He had obviously bought it on the way, more out of guilt than consideration. I didn't scold him, I just told him to sit down. Instead, I made him a plate of corn chowder, his favorite childhood soup. He took a sip and mumbled, "Still the best. Nobody makes it like you." I nodded. "You always asked for it when you had a cold."
Vi satt en silence for a moment.
Then I stood up and went to the cabinet. I took out a small wooden box. Inside were the USB drive and a few photos. Austin as a child gasping for breath from his asthma, Christian carrying him on his back to the emergency room, me sitting in the hospital hallway, eyes swollen, wrapped in a jacket I hadn't taken off for 2 days. I pressed play on the speaker. Victoria's voice filled the room. "Don't worry, I checked their pensions. Austin is easily swayed. House and car won't be a problem. And yes, we've arranged everything for their retirement." Her tone was complacent, calculated, self-assured. I turned off the recording, then pushed the box towards him. "I'm not here to argue with you, Austin," I said softly. "I just need you to see, to know who truly stands by your side." He didn't speak. His gaze wandered to the photos, then to the USB drive. He clenched his jaw, his lips forming a hard line, unable to meet my gaze. I stood up and went into the kitchen. "When you've figured it out," I said, without turning around.
"Come home for dinner."
He didn't stay. He stood at the door for a long time. Finally he left, closing the door softly behind him, but I knew deep down that the seed was planted. It was there now, buried in the soil of his doubt, waiting to be watered with silence, with absence, with the cold understanding that love, true love, doesn't come with bills or detailed expectations. This family isn't built on marble countertops and downtown views. It's built on night fevers and hospital benches. It's not money that holds it together, but heart.
Another quiet Saturday afternoon. The house was still.
That kind of stillness that remains after so many unspoken words. I had just pulled a tray of warm cookies from the oven when the doorbell rang. I opened it, and there stood Austin, illuminated by the soft spring light, with tired eyes and a grocery bag in his hand. Fruit, milk, a few slices of ham. "Just passing by," he said softly. "Thought I'd stop in." I didn't ask why. There was no need. I just nodded and stepped aside. "Your dad cut up some melon this morning. Grab a few pieces." He came in, moving slowly like someone visiting a place he once knew intimately but now saw with foreign eyes. His gaze wandered through the living room. The shelf still held his high school math trophies. The same picture frame next to the sofa, the three of us camping in the national park.
Austin on my shoulders, holding a leaf like a pritze.
I went into the kitchen to make tea. Through the window, I saw him standing in front of the old cherry tree in the backyard. Spring was just beginning to awaken it. Small buds shyly seeking light, uncertain. "Mom." His voice was soft, almost hesitant. "Back when I had such bad asthma, you were the one who took me to the emergency room, right?" I paused and nodded, my hands still on the tea tray. "Yes, your father was out of town. No taxi would stop, so I wrapped you in a blanket and ran the whole way. I was still wearing my slippers. My feet were bleeding by the time we arrived." He didn't look at me. He just kept staring at the tree, his voice barely a whisper. "I remember not being able to breathe. I remember panicking, and your hand on my chest, pressing down, telling me to hold on. I guess I buried it sometime, but it's still there. I just forgot how much you did." I said nothing, just poured the tea and placed the pot on the table. Finally, he turned around and sat on the sofa. He buried his head in his hands. "Mom," he said, his palms muffling his voice. "I was selfish." I slowly sat next to him. Instead of answering, I reached into the drawer and pulled out an old photo album. I opened it and handed it to him. There he was, 6 years old, in overalls too big for him, grinning as if the world had told him he could keep it. There he was, covered in flour in the kitchen during his first attempt at baking. There we were, the three of us on the sofa after his college exams, eating pizza and watching silly comedies until we were crying with laughter. I gently placed the album on his lap. Austin, I said softly, we never expected anything in return. But ask yourself, does the person at your side love you, or does she love what your father and I have built our entire lives? He didn't answer. He just stared at the photos, tracing his thumb over the edge of a faded memento. Mom, he began again, his voice hoarse. I really loved her. At first, I thought she was just scared. I thought if I tried harder, if I gave more, she would finally feel secure. I nodded slowly, but she didn't. She just kept taking. And you started to disappear. His shoulders slumped, his hands clutched the edges of the album. His eyes, now red, blinked hard, but no tears fell. He didn't stay for dinner. He just said he needed time to think. I didn't try to stop him. As he stood at the door, I only said, the tree in the yard, it's still there. When you figure it out, remember, it's been waiting. He nodded once, then left quietly. Later, I washed the teacups and wiped down the countertops. Christian was outside, trimming branches. The sun streamed through the curtains in soft golden stripes onto the wooden floor. We didn't speak, but there was no need, for I knew. The boy who once called for us in the middle of the night, who once had to be carried when he couldn't breathe, was finally beginning to find his way back. The time had reached a turning point. I knew if I waited any longer, Austin would remain caught in the tug-of-war between emotion and reason, slowly bleeding dry under the weight of his own denial, and Victoria, her appetite would only grow silently, relentlessly, until there was nothing left for him to give. He needed a radical shift, a moment of reckoning so sharp, so undeniable, that not even Austin could look away. A confrontation that left no room for excuses or blurred lines. So I called an old friend. Lindsay, the daughter of my former colleague Katie, had just finished law school and was interning at a private consulting firm for trusts and estates. I met her for coffee and explained everything carefully and calmly.
No drama, just the truth.
After listening, Lindsay agreed to help me set a trap. She posed as an external financial consultant, supposedly hired by Austin's firm, to offer premarital wealth planning services. Under the guise of future consultations on shared assets, she invited Victoria for an initial meeting. And Victoria took the bait. We met at a quiet table in a corner of a downtown coffee shop. Lindsay had prepared a discreet recording and a carefully worded list of questions to prompt Victoria to reveal the truth. Let's talk a little about post-marriage finances, Lindsay began. Do you have specific expectations regarding asset management? Victoria maintained her usual elegant demeanor with a slight smile. Well, I'm quite good with numbers. I'd probably handle the majority of the budget and monthly expenses, though Austin and I would, of course, make major decisions together. Lindsay nodded, then leaned forward gently. And what role do you envision for his parents in your financial life as a couple? Victoria paused briefly before letting out a careless giggle. Ideally, they'd help with a down payment for a house, maybe a car too. Later, I suppose, contribute to a future child's education fund or something. That's only fair. Then came the real test. Lindsay asked nonchalantly, would you consider their money as part of your future joint assets? This time, Victoria's tone became even more relaxed, almost giddy. Let's be honest, she said. People like them. If you treat them well, they don't hold anything back. I've already told Austin that it would be smart to get their house, their car, even any inheritance transferred into our names as soon as possible.
Just in case so meeting happens, we don't want any loose ends.
She took a sip of coffee and added with a chuckle, honestly, I'm in a bit of a hurry. His mother always plays sweet, but she's smart. I need to move before she makes decisions I can't undo. When Lindsay sent me the audio file, I was sitting at the kitchen table, half reading emails, half trying to suppress the bile in my throat. It confirmed every suspicion we had, every premonition, every gut feeling, with brazenness, with pride. She never saw Austin as a partner. She saw him as a means to an end. She never wanted to join our family. She wanted to conquer it, not with love or patience, but with strategy and speed. I didn't show Austin the recording immediately. I waited, because this moment, this kind of truth, only works when someone is ready to face it. It turned out I didn't have to wait long. A few days later, he called. His voice was deeper than usual, slower. You could hear the turmoil beneath it. "Mom," he said, "can I come over? I think we need to talk." I said yes, without asking questions. After dinner, I led him into the living room and played the recording. No preamble, just the sound of his fiancée.
Smiling, drinking coffee, and unraveling all our fears.
As the words filled the air, I saw him deflate. He clenched his jaw. His hands, resting on his knees, balled into fists until his knuckles turned white. "Victoria," he whispered, his voice broken. "Did she really say that?" "Yes, she did," I replied calmly and steadily. "And you were about to hand over your future to her. Our family's legacy, every ounce of trust your father and I built over decades." His eyes filled with tears, but he fought to keep them from falling. "I messed up, Mom," he said softly. "I was so desperate to prove I could handle love that I didn't realize it wasn't love at all. I thought if I gave more, she would feel secure. But all I did was lose myself." I didn't twist the knife. I didn't scold him, didn't say, "I told you so." I simply reached out and placed my hand on his shoulder, firm and warm, because sometimes the only thing harder than a broken heart is the weight of finally seeing someone for who they truly are. The next day, Austin made a decision. He ended it. He looked Victoria in the eyes and said, his voice firm as stone, "You are not worthy of what my mother has done for me." She tried everything: tears, pleading, promises. She cried about misunderstandings, claimed she never had ill intentions. She asked him to remember the good times, but he didn't waver once. Then her parents got involved. The polite, smiling couple from the restaurant was gone. They called Austin directly, without preamble. This time, their tone was sharp, accusatory. "You have no sense of responsibility," her father snarled. "You made a promise," her mother added, her voice full of thinly veiled threats. "Young couples argue, it's normal, but what really hurts is when you disappoint the older generation." They tried shame, pressure, guilt. But Austin didn't give in. For the first time, he made no excuses, didn't try to appease anyone. He ended the call and blocked their numbers without hesitation. The boy who once questioned every decision and made himself small to make others comfortable was gone. In his place stood a man who had seen the truth and chosen to stay true to it. Later that night, he came home. Not to pick up things, not to keep the peace, to be home. He walked into the living room and retrieved the old photo album he hadn't looked at in years. He sat on the sofa and slowly turned page after page, unhurried, without tears, just remembering. Photos of scraped knees and crooked smiles, lovingly lopsided birthday cakes, camping trips and late-night pizza, small moments that shaped a life. Finally, he looked up. His eyes were soft, but clear. "Mom," he said, "I just want to be myself again." After the breakup, Austin was quiet for a while. He didn't move back home immediately, didn't call often, didn't text much, but I felt it. Somewhere beneath the silence, his spirit was mending, like the earth after a storm, still muddy, still raw, but with seeds already beginning to sprout towards the light. Then, one Saturday morning, he showed up at the door, his arms full of a large cardboard box and an expression on his face I hadn't seen in a long time. A kind of peace that only comes when you finally let go of something heavy. "Mom," he said, "I packed some stuff, thought I'd bring it home." I nodded and took the box from him. It was heavier than it looked. Inside was more than just clothes. His old college guitar with a worn fretboard, a book with dog-eared pages full of scribbled notes, and a dented stainless steel water bottle that had clearly traveled through more than one chapter of his life. "Almost forgot I had this," he said, tracing his fingers over the guitar case. "But it turns out those were the only things I didn't want to leave behind." I didn't say much, just took the water bottle, washed it, filled it with warm water, and handed it back to him. Then I asked gently, "Where do you want to go from here?" He looked at me with clear eyes. "I want to find a job I truly believe in," he said.
"I quit the finance job."
"I'm applying for a community program coordinator position. It doesn't pay much, but it feels right." Something shifted in me then. I remembered him in high school, volunteering at the community center, walking dogs for elderly neighbors, tutoring kids at the library, just because it made him smile. He had always been that boy, bright, kind, endlessly curious. And now he was finding his way back. In the following weeks, Austin became a familiar face in town again. He helped the local church organize food drives, built portable shelters for the homeless, and even organized a little free library day, where kids exchanged used stories. Sometimes I'd see him from afar, unloading boxes from an old pickup truck, his shirt sweaty but always smiling. He looked different, not just lighter but freer. The tension in his shoulders had eased. The weariness in his eyes was gone. He was no longer in a hurry, no longer trying to prove something, he was just there. And every weekend, he came home for dinner. Not out of obligation, but because he wanted to. He sat at the kitchen table, asking about my back, about Christian's garden. Sometimes he brought small surprises. Rose jam because he knew I loved it. A bag of freshly ground coffee for Christian, even the sewing machine he had quietly repaired when he saw it wasn't working. One evening, as we passed plates around, Christian chuckled softly and said, "You used to wolf down your food in 10 minutes. Now you're here, arguing with your mother over kitchen time." Austin laughed. "Back then, I didn't understand. Now I know. Nothing tastes better than home." He didn't talk about Victoria anymore. At most, a quiet, "I'm glad you didn't give up." I knew the wound was still there, but I also saw him stitching it up. Not with regret, but with meaning. One afternoon, I saw him in the backyard, balancing on a stool, changing the light bulb on the porch. I handed him the wrench, and as he reached for it he said without looking up, "Mom, you should have let me hit that wall a long time ago." I smiled and shook my head. "I just didn't want you to crash so hard you couldn't get back up." He climbed down, tightened the light bulb one last time, and looked me in the eye. "Good thing you were always behind me," he said softly. And in that moment, under the gentle spring light, I realized something. He had found his way, not just back home, but back to himself. The second autumn arrived quietly, like a familiar friend slipping through open windows. That afternoon, Austin came home with someone new. Her name was Amber. She wore thin-rimmed glasses and a warm, calm smile. Her voice was gentle, but firm. She was a registered nurse at a nearby care facility. They had met at a charity event, helping the church prepare for their community Thanksgiving dinner. Austin told me later that it started with canned goods. Amber was climbing the church steps, laden with 3 overflowing grocery bags, out of breath but determined not to drop a single can. Austin saw her from the parking lot and ran over to help her. He took 2 bags without asking, and she smiled at him as if it were the first time someone had just shown up without her having to ask. She not only had a good heart, but one that was firmly grounded. That evening, as we worked side by side in the kitchen preparing dinner, I saw it with my own eyes. At some point, we got on the topic of family, exchanging anecdotes as we chopped vegetables and stirred pots. I casually asked if her parents were still working. She nodded. "They're nearing retirement. I've saved a little here and there, in case they need help later. But my dad tells me not to worry yet. He says the last thing he wants is for me to put my life on hold for them." She laughed as she said it, without bitterness or drama, just with a natural tenderness, as if she had grown up in a home where love meant not making someone's care a burden. In that moment, I realized, true goodness isn't shown in grand speeches or a bullet point list. It lives quietly in the way someone takes on responsibility, without ever expecting to be paid for it. Later in the evening, Amber helped me bake cookies in the kitchen. She stirred the dough and said, "Austin always raves that your cookies are the best in the world." I thought he was exaggerating, but I was wrong. They're better than the ones I ate as a kid. I laughed and shook my head. He used to say that too as a child, but he'd only eat 2 and hide the rest in his desk drawer so no one would take them. Christian joined us, talking about sports. Amber didn't pretend to be interested. She listened, asked thoughtful questions, and even mentioned a few baseball terms that made Christian raise his eyebrows and smile. After dinner, she quietly helped me clear the table, wiped the countertop, and put away the leftovers in containers as if she had always known the layout of our kitchen. She didn't wait for me to ask her. She just did it. And before she left, she turned to me with a sincerity that shone in her eyes. "I know you've been through a lot," she said softly, But I'm not here to fill a void. I just like him for who he is, him. Not his story, not his future, not the version someone else could mold him into. That word fell soft as a feather and firm as truth. I stood at the door as they left, watching their silhouettes disappear into the night. He walked just ahead of her, but she didn't lag behind. The breeze moved the wind chimes on the porch, and their sound was delicate and familiar, like a lullaby I hadn't heard since Austin still fit in my arms. Later that night, after Austin had dropped Amber off, he came back. He didn't say much. He just sat quietly in the backyard under the old trellis where the ivy had begun to climb for the season. I made 2 cups of tea, brought him one, and handed it to him without a word. He took a sip, held the cup in his hands, and then spoke. "Mom," he said softly, with a voice that was deeper than usual. "Thank you for not giving up on me." I didn't look at him, just gazed at the steam rising from my cup, replied gently, "I was never afraid you'd take the wrong path. I was just afraid you'd never stop to look back." He was silent for a moment, then turned to me. "I used to think you were the obstacle," he said, looking directly at me, as if you were holding me back from growing. "But now I know. You were the only one I could always count on when I fell." We sat there for a long time without speaking, letting the wind hum its quiet song through the vines above us, and in the silence of that autumn night, with the tea cooling in our hands and the forgiveness blooming in the quiet, I realized something. My son had come home before, but this time he had truly returned. The days passed one by one, fitting together like warm, familiar clothes. And slowly, the house returned to how it once was. I tended my roses again in the mornings, pruning withered blossoms and loosening the soil for new blooms. Christian returned to his routine. Every Thursday afternoon, he volunteered at the church. Austin often stopped by, not out of guilt or obligation, but because he wanted to. He raked leaves from the garden, checked the wiring in the kitchen, changed the air filters before we even noticed. Sometimes Amber came with him, bringing a tin of something homemade. Cinnamon rolls, cornbread, lemon bars still warm from the oven. She moved around our kitchen as if she had been born into its rhythm. Never asking where anything was, just knowing. We didn't talk directly about the past, but every now and then, as we sat around the table, carving roast chicken or passing sweet potatoes, Christian would sigh and say with a smile, "Our boy finally figured it out, didn't he?" And I would nod, silently grateful that some lessons, no matter how painful, eventually lead to home. Austin continued to work on community projects. It didn't make him rich, but it was steady and fulfilling. He didn't miss a single family gathering. He didn't bring extravagant gifts, didn't boast about titles. He came home with grocery store steaks on sale and a bottle of value brand red wine with a crooked label that was surprisingly smooth on the finish. One Sunday afternoon, I asked him a question I hadn't asked in a long time.
Are you happy now?
He paused, then smiled. Not the kind of smile that tries to prove something, but one that runs deep. "Yes," he said. "I am." Not the kind of happiness that looks good from the outside, not the showy kind, but the kind I can afford, the kind I can wear without pretending, the kind that always brings me back here. I swelled. I felt something soften inside me, like a rose opening under the right sun, because that was all it was. This whole life, all the detours, the agony, the noise and pain of growing up, was just a long journey to a simple destination. To find a place where you don't have to pretend, a place where you're not afraid of losing. A place that doesn't collapse when you do. This place doesn't have to be grand, new, or perfect. It just has to be strong enough to hold your chaos. Soft enough to forgive your mistakes. Firm enough to tell you that you can start over. And that place is called home, called Mom.